You might have heard before the break the president saying in the press conference that Nvidia H20 chip is obsolete, but said there's still a market for them in China. And that comes after Chinese state media accused them of being a national security risk because of potential backdoors. Our Eunice Yoon has more on that in today's Tech Check. Hey, Eunice.
Hey, Carl. Well, it looks as though the relationship between China and Nvidia's H20 chip is very complicated. The messaging out of China recently has been that the H20, which is a chip that the Chinese want to have, could be bad for the country. So in several posts by a social media account that's linked to Chinese state TV, the Chinese were suggesting that the Chinese don't actually have to buy this particular chip. Yuyan Tantian called the H20 far from safe for China. It says that Nvidia needs to substantiate its claims that it has no so-called backdoors in those chips. It alleges that installing backdoors is a condition by the U.S. government to easing its export curbs and allowing Nvidia to sell into China. Nvidia issued a statement saying Nvidia does not have backdoors in our chips that would give anyone a remote way to access or control them. Now, the Chinese tech companies here count as some of the biggest clients for Nvidia. The H20 is the industry standard here in China. It's not the best for training. So in that way, President Trump is right that this is one that doesn't have as much processing power, but at the same time, it is really good at inferencing. So this means that the chip is able to recall information. And it just so happens that the Chinese industry depends very heavily on inference, especially when it comes to DeepSeek. Those orders for H20s rose very quickly, along with the boom of DeepSeek's AI models. The H20 is very suitable, people say, for this particular industry. Now, one other thing that people have been discussing is what is the motivation, really, of the Chinese when it's sending off these messages. And I spoke to Jimmy Goodrich, who's an advisor to Rand, and he had told me that the Chinese are really walking a very fine line, because on the one hand, they want to make sure that they get these chips in, which are important for, say, the Alibabas and the DeepSeeks, as well as ByteDance. But then at the same time, they want to send some messages like, hold on, we don't want to be too dependent on this particular chip, and to an outsider, Nvidia, at that.
Eunice, does any of this play into conversations around a trade deal? Because we're also wondering about this extension that expires tomorrow between the U.S. and China. We're watching things like soybeans as a potential, negotiation there, or these rare earth magnets. Where do the chips fit in, or is that a separate issue?
I think it's an issue that is on the table. At least that's what the messaging has been. And we know that the Chinese have wanted to get their hands on more advanced chips. I think what's interesting is that we saw the FT actually was reporting that the Chinese were looking to get the HBM, or high bandwidth memory chips, on the table, that they were hoping to be able to get that in the discussion. And when I was talking with Jimmy Goodrich, he had told me that the H20 chip actually has these HBMs in them, and they're really important because these HBM chips would help the Chinese be able to create their own AI chips, because they're so supportive and important for companies like Huawei. So in that way, this could be part of the discussion.
Yeah, interesting to listen to the president confirm the 15% number, remark that he originally was looking for something more like 20, and they negotiated down, and then the notion that Blackwell would not be treated the same as some of these H20s.
Yeah, sort of played down the technological capability of what China's able to get from the U.S., Eunice.
Yeah, I think what's interesting here is the way it's being viewed. People are saying, wow, this is a really Chinese thing. That a lot of times, well, here, it's the lower level officials who end up having to pay a cut to higher level officials. It's something that they don't actually see in the United States, but it's much more familiar to people in this country.
Yeah, interesting times for semis. Thank you, Eunice. Eunice Yoon, watching the Nvidia news in the heels of the president's press conference.